Welcome back to So This is Thailand. Coming up on Expert Advice, all I can say is there's two sure things in life, death and taxes. We can't help you with the first, but our expert today can help you with the second. I'd like to introduce our guest today, Mr. John Casella, who is a partner at Baker Tilly Thailand Tax and Consulting Services. Thanks, John, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, taxes, the tax man cometh, so they say, but I know a lot of expats who come here, or businessmen, might be a little daunted about, oh my God, we're in Thailand, there's a completely different tax system here. Good question to start off with is, what's the difference?
Well, I think major difference that you might find in Thailand versus your home country would be the level of compliance or the strictness of the detail that you need to provide with your accounting reports. There's monthly VAT filings, there's monthly withholding taxes. Most countries don't have the type of monthly withholding taxes that they have in Thailand. So you really need to know the rules because it is very rules-based, it's very compliance-based. And if you don't know the rules, then you're in big trouble.
So you would say that it's absolutely necessary to find yourself an accountant. You couldn't go about doing it yourself or trying to?
I would strongly recommend that, yeah. Right. I have to say, some people that I've come across have said, oh, I'll wait until I have a successful business before I hire a really good accountant. But you can't become a good business if your accounts are incorrect, if you're making mistakes. Because if you're lucky enough to even become profitable after a year or two of bad accounting, then when you do become profitable, the revenue department will take notice of you, and ultimately they'll come and visit, and the mistakes that you neglected to get right the first time, you'll end up paying for it the second time, and it's just not worth it in the long run.
Well, looking back, we had actually discussed on an earlier show looking at business plans and starting your business. In terms of the accounting side of it, is this something that you should really be thinking day one along with what's my idea? Also, how am I going to do this accounting-wise?
Yeah, I think you need to really look at accounting because the decisions you have to make need to be based on facts, and the facts come from your accounts. If you have good accounting information, then you have the ability to make good decisions. Bad accounting information will lead to bad decisions, and you can't afford to make those mistakes.
Right. So having said that, how do you go about finding yourself a really good accountant? What are the things you look for?
Well, I think each person is different because obviously communication with that accountant is very important and a level of trust. So like hiring anybody in a key position, you have to have that relationship or that feeling of trust with the person. Technical knowledge is very important, but as much as technical knowledge is important, you also need to be able to communicate with that person because they might be preparing your accounts to the best of their knowledge, but if they don't understand you, they don't understand your needs, they don't understand the way that you're doing your business, then you're speaking two different languages quite literally, and they're bound to be mistakes. And so it's very important to know and understand the person you hire as an accountant.
I know when another issue, which is, I might say parallel in terms of the amount of paperwork you do, is immigration. That seems to change, the regulations seem to change practically monthly. On the accounting side of things, is this something where the system has been fairly stable, so at least there's some confidence that, all right, my procedures today are the same procedures as tomorrow? Or is my accountant hopefully the one that's looking after this?
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully your accountant is looking after that, but I think a lot of people assume that their accountant is looking after it and they don't bother to check and they don't bother to really examine the details. The Thai accounting standards are not very different from the international accounting standards of any country. In fact, they're very much the same, but again, it's how the accountant applies those rules. It's whether or not really the substance of the transactions are getting captured in your accounts. And it's important as well to understand exactly what rules you need to comply with. For example, the monthly tax filings, as I mentioned earlier. If you don't understand that and your accountant isn't being required to prove to you that they know what they're doing and to ultimately file when they're supposed to, it's quite easy for mistakes to happen. And again, you're the one that pays for those mistakes. So you need to take ownership of that and make sure you're doing it right.
So I heard about your famous list of 7. Could you explain a little bit more about those?
Well, I have, let's say, when I do a workshop that talks about how to avoid getting ripped off by your accountant, and so I do have a list of items that I recommend people to follow. First of all, make sure your monthly tax filing is being completed and that you understand that the filing is done correctly. Because at the end of the day, if it's not being done correctly, you're the one that has to pay for it. You also need to make sure that you are receiving regular monthly accounts. If they can prepare reports for the Revenue Department, they can prepare reports for you. Third, you have to make sure that you understand those reports, that the reports are really answering your questions, the things that you need to know to run the business. They're not just being made for somebody else to make sure the Revenue Department's happy or to make sure the bank is happy. They have to make sure that you're happy. Once you make sure that they're understandable, you have to dig into the detail and make sure that they make sense. So for example, you need to know your revenues. You need to really understand what's being reported is accurate and what you expect it to be. You need to know your expenses and really scrutinize your expenses. And at the end of the day, then you need to make sure that if the accounts aren't saying what you want them to say, that you find the solutions to make the right decisions that make your business succeed.
It sounds like it can be very stressful if it goes wrong for you.
It can be. I think though, if you have a good team with you, and particularly, as I say, an accountant that you trust, then it shouldn't be that stressful because they should be giving you good information that tells you what you need to do to get out of the problems you're in.
Earlier you mentioned about how your accountant, they should know something about your business, how it's working. Are there any differences for different industries? Obviously in Thailand, some industries are restricted to foreigners, some aren't, some businesses. Are there any regulations that where, if I'm in, let's say, the logistics, it's very different if I'm in the medical field in terms of accounting?
I would say the accounting isn't very much different. I think there are many other departments that you're dealing with that Customs Department if you're importing, for example, or the Revenue Department rules for service businesses versus manufacturers are very different. So I think if you're going to be working with a team, they do have to have industry-specific knowledge. But as far as the accounting rules go, they're quite straightforward. I mean, it's not the rules that are the problem. It's the strict application of the rules and understanding how you need to comply with those rules. That's where you get caught.
Are there any common mistakes that catches people out?
I'd have to say, let me think about that. I think the withholding tax is probably one of the big things that catch people by surprise. They don't realize that you have to, when you're paying your service providers, you have to withhold 3% or 5%. And if you don't withhold that, it's your responsibility ultimately to pay it, even though they're the ones that made the money. So if you neglect to submit it, you might pay them too much money. And then you have to pay the Revenue Department a second time for the withholding tax that you didn't withhold from them. And a lot of people get caught, and that amount of money can pile up.
Well, it sounds like you really have to be really diligent about what you're doing here, because at the end of the day, you are the one who is held responsible.
Yes, the buck stops with you.
The buck stops, or actually, hopefully, the buck stops with you. Well, thank you very much for going over this. I know that's a fairly complicated subject and one that's really meant to be dealt with by professionals in a more lengthy period of time as well. So we do recommend, or I should say you recommend, getting an accountant.
Certainly, getting a good accountant. I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's looking for a good accountant.
Well, John, thank you very much for joining us today. And don't go away, because we do have more coming up on So This Is Thailand.
Bangsai Arts and Crafts Center, one of the major tourist attractions in Ayutthaya province. Bangsai Arts and Crafts Center provides the training center where consists of workshops for various arts and crafts taught and practiced here. Since its inception, more than 10,000 trainees have graduated from Bangsai Arts and Crafts Center. The center also supports graduates who wishes to follow their newly acquired vocations in their own localities by providing them at cost the materials and equipment they need to get started. It also provides an alumni shop for selling their finished products at the center, complete with a guarantee that they are handmade, Tourists can wander through these buildings and observe the finest and precision Thai craftsmen require in making their various products. Long hours and painstaking trial and training are necessary to the attainment of genuine quality. Contact Bangsai Arts and Crafts Center at 03-536-6252223.